This is Entrepreneurs Get Visible, the podcast for people who want more impact, influence, and income. I'm Anna Parker-Naples, and I'll be sharing with you proven methods from leading entrepreneurs that help you get visible as an authority in your field. Because anything's possible when you get visible. In today's episode of Entrepreneurs Get Visible, I want to talk you through why having a really strong position with a podcast, and I don't just mean in terms of chart position, but standing out there as an authority makes a really big difference. So the first thing is that behind a good podcast, you want to have a strong offer that you know your audience actually want and will actually pay for. And I say that because I see time and again people starting podcasts and not really thinking through fully whether they have something behind that podcast that their audience are going to want to purchase or that they can afford. And there are two levels to this, because when you position yourself really strongly, you might well have a low cost offer that can become scalable. But what do you have at the higher end? Because when you position yourself powerfully in your industry, people will want to pay you for great results. And if you have a high ticket offer, then your podcast becomes incredibly lucrative. Because what we see with podcasts is this trickle-down effect. It's not necessarily that you're going to earn through sponsorship, although that is entirely plausible. But it is the fact that you have put your stamp on what you do in your authority. So when you're thinking about starting a podcast, I always encourage people to think about the launch being important. And the reason that launch is important is that it puts you on the map and you can create insane levels of visibility by getting that launch strategy right. Now, I know that there are many of you out there who are just way too busy to consider having to learn all of the tech from scratch, who are too busy even to get their VAs, their virtual assistants, to learn how to edit and upload. And the thing is, I get that, because when I was starting out in my own podcasting journey 3 or 4 years ago, I did everything myself, but the audio was a doddle for me because I came from that background. And I understand that there are some really big challenges to overcome. But that doesn't have to be possible. And in fact, many people will either train up their VA to do everything for their podcast, to edit, to upload, to create the show notes and all of those things. And that's fine. Or you could find freelancers to do it for you. But you've got to think, when you are creating any level of content, whether it's social media posts, whether it's your YouTube, whether it is a podcast, whether it's a blog, where do you want to fit in? Because for everything we do in the online space, there are always going to be those fighting and scrabbling at the bottom. Do you want to have content that isn't great quality? There are those who have a strong positioning in the middle, and then there are those who are absolutely killing it, where everything is professional and it is top notch. So you've got to think, how do you want your podcast and any of your other content to represent you and what you do? And I would recommend that you look at what areas of your business you can make sure you bring in the best to assist you. So, for example, if you're doing your own Facebook ads, and if many of you out there are like me, you'll have started off trying to do it yourself, trying to figure it all out and realizing that there's so much to it. And then deciding, actually, this is something I really need to invest in because this is the front end of my business. It might be the case with YouTube. Maybe you started off doing everything yourself and realizing that you're missing some key components. And actually your YouTube channel is that front end of your business that you want to look professional, that you want to sound amazing, that you want to have all of the things behind it, all of the tags and the keywords and the links. You want to, and the end titles, you want to have all of those so that they look the business, because you're not prepared to have a business where it looks like you've done it all yourself. And the same goes with podcasting. And there are two elements to this. So there is the audio production side of it, making sure that audio sounds amazing. In fact, I read a statistic recently that over 50% of people will turn off within the first 60 seconds. Now, very often that first 60 seconds is before a podcaster has even spoken. But if your audio quality is amazing, people are going to be hooked in, drawn in, and know that this is a place they want to stay. So I'd really be thinking about that. What level of content do you want to be putting out there? And this is across the board. This is even in terms of how you deliver your programs. What level of professionalism and what level of authority do you want to come across in the work that you put out there? So there are ways that you could get your VA and your team to do many of these elements, but they won't understand necessarily the launch element of a podcast. And this is, in reality, this is a very one-time opportunity. Yes, you will have to relaunch when you do your 100th episode or when you reach a birthday of your podcast. But really, the way you put yourself on a map with a podcast is making sure that you know that strategy inside out. You do it all to a T. Because you've got to think about where you sit in your industry and where you're prepared to play, because it has a knock-on effect with who finds you, who doesn't find you, what they think about you if they have found your show, and how much more likely they are to purchase from you. And if you've got a high ticket offer, you want to make sure that you've got high ticket content. I want to just share a spotlight on a recent client of mine. So she came to me and worked with me in the podcast production agency because she just did not have time and knew that she wanted something done really well. So we worked with her to get her podcast out in about 6 weeks from when we first had a consultancy call. And her team then were fully briefed on everything that needed to happen. We'd help them with even the content that needed to go into their social media in order to make sure that launch went with a bang. Now, 17 episodes on, not only did she knock off people like Joe Wicks, Jay Shetty, Tony Robbins, and people powerfully within her industry, but she's now had 72,000 downloads and thousands of people join her Facebook group who are citing that the reason they have found her is because of her podcast. Now that's incredible, only 17 episodes later, but that is not incredible in that it's unique. When you get a really strong brand positioning with your podcast, you stand out as the person who is creating valuable content for those listeners, and people want to work with you. And on the back of that, the podcast was actually released strategically 8 weeks before a new offer was going out. And on the back of that, on the back of the strong positioning of the podcast and being the one leading the way within that industry, she then went on to have an £82,000 launch, which was not how her business was functioning. So I urge you to consider, where do you want to stand? Who do you need to bring in for support in your business? And I'm going to let you know that I know, despite the fact I run the podcast membership, that not everybody wants to do it themselves. Not everybody wants a DIY offer. So I would like to invite you to come onto a call to discuss with me and my team how we can support you to have a chart-topping podcast. The link to get in touch with me is under these show notes, or reach out, DM me, or find me on Messenger or wherever you want. Anna Parker-Naples, come find me and we can have a talk about how in the next couple of months we can create a podcast for you that we go into 2021 with, that is going to put your business powerfully in front, because that is how you have impact and that is how you scale your income.
Thank you for listening to Entrepreneurs Get Visible. To get your free checklist on how to raise your profile and to find out about our community, go to annaparkernaples.co.uk/get visible.